What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Toma Todito Boxing Show, and it is an absolute pleasure for me to be able to bring these next few episodes to you. We're going to do it in parts, and a lot of fights that we got to cover. It's been a long week. I've been anxious to get these preview episodes out there. We got a lot of fights going on today in a few hours' time, and so I actually held off because a good buddy of mine who seems to be even more passionate than me at the sport of boxing is joining me today. And he goes by the moniker of El Cholo Travieso, a hell of a guy, a lot of passion, and often outshines me whenever we're talking about boxing. We lose hours out of our days just going back and forth, and you're going to get a preview of that today. This first episode, we're going to talk about the cruiserweight division, a fight that's about to take place in about 3 or 4 hours time, as far as my time zone, and that's between Chris Billam-Smith. CBS is going to be running it back against Riakporhe, a guy that he ended up losing to. The only blemish on his record to date is against Richard Riakporhe. And now, both of their careers ended up taking different trajectories. CBS ended up getting the title. He's the current WBO champion. Probably, in my opinion, one of the more well-rounded fighters as far as the cruiserweight champions are. Not the heavy-handed monster that is Jayo Petaya. Not the newly arrived Zurdo Ramirez, who just made his impressive debut at cruiserweight. But CBS seems to be well-rounded. Now he's going to run it back against Richard Riakporhe, a guy who's on a similar trajectory and a similar record to when they faced each other the first time around. Similar records, same amount of knockouts for both fighters, both sitting at 13 knockouts each. But again, the storyline, Chris Billam-Smith's only loss is at the hands of Richard Riakporhe. Are we going to see basically a replay of what happened the first time around? Or are we going to see the new, more versed, more developed Chris Billam-Smith defend his title and give the first blemish of Riakporhe's career to him, hand him the first loss of his career? So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guest, El Cholo Travieso. How do you see this fight playing out, knowing that the first fight was a heavy contested, not the most action, but a lot of strategy in between? It ended up going all the way, and the decision went to Riakporhe's side. Now their careers have gone in similar fashion on the upward trajectory, except Chris Billam-Smith's been on the fast track and now a champion, where Riakporhe ended up having a chance to challenge Jayo Petaya a while back for the IBF title, pulled out of that fight and out of that negotiation, and now he has his second shot at a title against a former foe. Talk to me about this fight.
I think this, good afternoon, just to let you know, I'm honored, and it's a great pleasure of mine to be here with you guys today. Like I said, I'm a big boxing fan, and I follow boxing like I used to see back in the day, like a soap opera. So I may know a little bit, and I may know a lot. It all depends on who and what the fighters are, their careers, and where they stand in their careers. But as far as, thank you for the introduction, by the way.
Hey, you got it. Welcome, man. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you're here, and you can lose those nerves. I know you're a little bit nervous.
I am a little bit nervous.
Let it go, because once we get talking into boxing, this is your world. This is your realm.
So, to me, Smith going against Riakporhe again, I think it's gonna be. I sway more to Smith because he's been active. Even though he lost the first decision against Riakporhe, he's been active. He's been continuing fighting those great champions that he's been fighting. 47-5, Masentek, and you got a 19-0, 14-2, 14-1. So he's been actively fighting other fighters with great records, and it's all about the experience for me. You know, we maybe look at Julio Cesar Chavez. He was a great champion back in the day, but as he got older, his skills diminished. Not to say that Riakporhe has diminished his skills too, but he hasn't been as active. There's a reason why Smith is back on the top again, even though he did lose to Riakporhe back in the day. I think Smith has a good chance of taking this one.
I'll tell you the biggest names, and you mentioned one of them. For Riakporhe, the biggest names that he's got was Jack Massey, which was a fight that took place in 2019. 16-0 champ at that time, or 16-0 fighter at that time in Jack Massey when he stepped into the ring. And unanimous decision for Riakporhe there. From there, opposition was decent. But then his next big fight was against Krzysztof Glowacki, 32-3 when he stepped in the ring. And Riakporhe stops him in the 4th round. Then we go against Dylan Brejan, and it wasn't the top level of opposition, but a good win for Riakporhe, and now he steps in. So it's been a topsy-turvy career and uphill climb for Riakporhe, whereas Chris Billam-Smith, you end up mentioning his last outing against Mateusz Masternak, a former champ himself, Masternak, who gave a boxing lesson to Chris Billam-Smith in that showdown. Everybody thought that Chris Billam-Smith was losing that fight, and Chris ends up pulling it out. CBS was cut. He was cut over the left eye, but Masternak ends up pulling out. The towel's thrown in due to a rib injury, and CBS ends up winning that cruiserweight title. What about the fight before? Lawrence Okolie. A huge showdown at that time when Chris Billam-Smith was on the up and up. Okolie, a former Olympian, a former pedigree fighter for the UK. That was a huge fight, and one where Lawrence Okolie was favored to win. And what happened there? Chris Billam-Smith ends up getting him, right? Okolie down in the 4th round, down in the 10th, down in the 11th round. And then he gets deducted a point himself for holding both round 5 and round 7. Chris Billam-Smith, again, cut. We expect him to be cut later today. But the opposition level of Chris Billam-Smith after his first defeat has been next level. Versus Riakporhe having a really good fight and then tune-ups, you could say. Or not the top level of opposition, but he continues on the winning ways. So experience is a huge factor for me on this fight. And I see Chris Billam-Smith obviously as a favorite today to retain the title.
And I agree with you. It's all about the experience. It's all about the opposition that you're facing. A lot of boxers, they start out, let's talk about Canelo. If you look at his early records, the opposition that he was facing was not the best, especially with these Mexican fighters that fight at a very young age, and they turn pro at the age of 16, 17, depends on what part of the Mexico you're fighting. But as they go up, their opposition starts getting better and better. And I'm a true believer. You're as good as what your opponents are. You're as good as who you're fighting. You can have a fight 5 years ago, and Smith might have lost, but it's a different ballgame now, especially with the oppositions that Smith has been facing. Vice Riakporhe, which is he's had a couple of tune-up fights. They're not the best. And to me, especially, you also have to look at their fights. How was their fights? It was a unanimous decision.
Right.
Where Riakporhe won that one. So in my opinion, he pulled it off. He didn't really dominate. He barely pulled it off. And the judges, we can't really trust the judges. They're just saying in boxing, keep it out of the judges' hands. Let's knock this guy out. And there's a reason for that. A lot of fans don't really agree with the judges' decisions in a lot of fights. Not to say this is the case here right now, but it was a unanimous decision. I think
it was a split decision actually on the first one.
Okay,
10-round fight. The interesting part about that was the scores, how split the scores were because of how tight the fight went. It wasn't that it was the most active fight. It wasn't the most strategic fight, but it was one where there was a lot of hesitation on both sides, maybe because they respected each other's power quite a bit. But both of them found themselves at similar stages in their career, undefeated when they went into it. Both of them were on the 8-0, 9-0 records. Even knockouts were very similar at that stage. You look at the scores, and you had one score was 95-94 for Riakporhe, and then you had 96-93. So now you had a judge giving it 3 rounds in favor of CBS, and then 97-92, the deciding judge, which gave 5 rounds in favor of Riakporhe. So all 3 judges saw 3 different fights.
Exactly.
Everybody saw 3 different fights. There was an issue in round 7 when CBS ends up getting a rough count. And other than that, if that would have been, for as tight as the fight was, if that would have been the denominator or the factor, then it should have been a 1-round fight, if that. The one that I agree with would be the 95-94 score,
And I agree
which was
with
as
you.
tight as it was.
It really
so
was.
if we see these guys pick up from round 13, from where they left off in 2019, and they pick up from round 13 or round 11, I guess, because it was a 10-round fight back then I think that CBS starts walking away with it because he's been used to facing different levels of opposition and higher levels of opposition than that of Richard Riakporhe. Riakporhe is very consistent, though. We can't discard him. He's very consistent, whether he fights a tune-up or he fights a good fighter, a known fighter. He shows up and he does his game plan. This is not what you were mentioning of Teofimo, where Teofimo fights to the opponent's level. It's a fighter that you don't know, and Teofimo shows up horrible in that fight. Jermaine Ortiz, he fought to Jermaine Ortiz instead of just wiping the floor with him. Kambosos, same thing. He fought down to Kambosos' level when the corner was a mess for Teofimo, right? Instead of fighting his fight like Josh Taylor. He fights Josh Taylor and just routs him. This is what we might see today, right? Somebody fighting down to a level or somebody actually fighting to their development.
And I agree with you on that, but it all depends on Smith. Is he that type of fighter? Is he going to bring it? Or is he going to fight to the level of Riakporhe?
Yeah, that's the intrigue.
I think, on paper, Smith takes this one. Unanimous decision. He probably saw some holes in his game. And
you see any knockdowns in the fight?
I don't. Especially because they're both solid fighters. They both have a similar record. Just -2. Especially like if they went on a unanimous, a split decision. I don't see a knockdown. I don't see a knockout. I think they're very consistent in the game plan that they're bringing in. They're both strong fighters, strong chins.
I think we're looking at speed, footwork, definitely favoring Riakporhe. Probably a little more elusive with the fight. Chris Billam-Smith
has more experience.
Probably better boxing.
Yeah.
Mixes his attack a lot better. And I don't see any drops, but Billam's known for cutting. He gets cut quite a bit. So there's probably going to be some bloodshed on behind of CBS.
It goes with the bone structure. A lot of fighters, especially if I don't want to bring UFC, but there's a lot of UFC fighters that cut easily. It's because the anatomy of their bone structure. They have the sharp edges around the ball sockets, and so Smith is probably one of those fighters. I really don't know until but it's one of those things where Smith does cut quick, and if that's the case, I think Smith needs to bring it in. It needs to bring
scar tissue too, right? That's the issue of where they continuously get hit, and if they don't get it taken care of. So it'll be an interesting fight. I'm also siding with Chris Billam-Smith to pull this off, retain his title, and continue his trajectory. So let's look at this. If Riakporhe wins this fight, now he's gonna have 2 victories over Chris Billam-Smith. Would there be a trilogy?
Depends. I mean, you got the Barrera Morales. You got the Pacquiao.
But those ones were split. Now you're going to have somebody with 2-0 over someone.
It all depends how close it is. Because at the end of the day, people love exciting fights. If it's a one-sider, I say no. But it's a close decision. And if it's a split decision and they both bring it and it's an exciting fight, I would like to see a third one, yes. But like I said, Riakporhe has to show dominance. And then, okay, we can close that chapter out, and Smith has to move on somewhere else.
Like the trilogy fight would be if it becomes, and I'm kind of on board with you. If it's a tight fight and it goes to the judges, and Billam-Smith pulls it off, with Riakporhe having that first victory over him, then I see a trilogy for sure. If it's that tight of a fight, if Billam wins, as he's expected to do, whether it's by stoppage, which I don't think will be stoppage, or if it's by decision, then I see Chris Billam-Smith going on to maybe Zurdo Ramirez or even Jairo Petaya and unify. Riakporhe, I don't think he'll get in there with Jairo Petaya. It didn't happen the first time around for whatever issues, and it came up in the lead up to the fight where Chris Billam-Smith's like, you pulled out of the first one, and they went back and forth where one saying, I wasn't a chicken, it was contract stuff, but everybody's scared of Jairo Petaya's power. He just knocks people out and puts them to sleep. Zurdo Ramirez is a new arrival from 168 to 175. He's probably the smarter option for Billam-Smith if he was successful here to go against Zurdo Ramirez, and it would probably be a very entertaining fight at that, boxistically speaking.
I agree with you. I think Zurdo Ramirez would bring a very good fight to Smith, And I think it would be a headliner, and I could see a lot of money being made in that fight, especially Zurdo Ramirez being a Mexican, and we all Mexicans. A lot of Mexican fighters bring a lot of Mexican fans, and that would be a major fight for Smith. And I agree with you.
You think that would be Smith's homecoming to, or at least arrival to the U.S. market?
Yes, most definitely, especially here to the Phoenix area where the stadiums are packed. Whenever we got the Mexican boxers coming in, they're packed with Mexicans. There's a lot of Mexicans out there, Mexican Americans, Latinos, whatever you guys want to call it. I'm not being political here, but they bring the masses, and Mexicans love going to boxing matches. Latinx. So yes, I see that. Whatever. I see that being a mega fight. If anything, a mega fight. But he has to pull this one off.
That would be good. I think UK side or even Australia. I think that would be huge for Jai Opetaia, Chris Billam-Smith, Riakporhe. I would love to see if he fights as elusive as he has, and he fights like he talks. Then he should rout Chris Billam-Smith. Go 2-0 over him, lift the title. 2 losses of Chris Billam-Smith's record would be at the hands of one man. That means he's got this guy's number now. Then he would go with all the confidence in the world against a bigger name, right? I don't see Riakporhe fighting Zurdo. I would see him probably fighting, what's the other champ's name? Firat Arslan, or what was the other champ's name that's on there in the cruiserweights?
The cruiserweights,
let me see who the other champ is here. Let's bring him up. All right, so we got, because I don't remember who Zurdo fought. So Firat Arslan would be, he's got a mandatory. He's like in line to fight Zurdo. So it'd be Noer Mikhailian would be the WBC champ. That's an attractive fight for Zurdo right now. I don't think Noer gets into a fight with Jai Opetaia. I think he would be probably looking to fight Riakporhe rather than a Chris Billam-Smith. He's a heavy-handed, flat-footed fighter that's come forward, a come-forward style, who gets troubled whenever there's somebody with fast hands, fast footwork, and just boxes him from the outside. The in and out will affect him completely. Zurdo is more of your boxer style, right?
Yes.
Good hands, so he beats Arsene Goulamirian, same thing. Firat and Arsene, very, very same styles where they're flat-footed, heavy punching, heavy-handed fighters, and they're relying on that power to bail them out. That might not always happen, and it didn't happen for Arsene against Zurdo because Zurdo outboxed him. Zurdo took the fight to him. So we got Chris Billam-Smith, in my opinion, he wins. He goes on to a huge showdown with hopefully Zurdo. I don't think he would take the Jai Opetaia fight, although he doesn't run from him. And I don't see Noer Mikhailian having any action anytime soon as far as unification. If Billam-Smith goes against Opetaia, then I could see Zurdo and Mikhailian fighting. If Riakporhe wins, he would probably pursue a lower name fighter and then maybe try to get negotiations in that side of the country or in that side of the world with Jai Opetaia if he got in there with them. But I don't see him coming stateside.
I don't think so. I don't think he'll want to face Opetaia.
So I don't know. We're not favoring Riakporhe a lot right now, but it's because of the trajectories, right? And so we're both kind of in agreement that Chris Billam-Smith should be able to retain and move on to bigger fights.
I agree with you on that one.
Cool. Yes. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll close this one out, and we're gonna continue going, guys. So as soon as this one's up, you guys will continue checking out the next episodes. A lot of boxing today. It's a huge day, a huge Saturday night that's just hours away from us now, and this is the first one on hand. The undercard. Did you get a chance to check out this undercard? There's one fighter that's been getting a lot of notoriety in this undercard, and that's Ben Whitaker, and he's gonna be on the undercard. He's doing that drunken style boxing it's attracting attention because he's kind of like mocking the other fighters when he's in the ring. Maybe like a mix of drunken style and Naseem Hamed, but he's attracting a lot of eyeballs.
But he's a solid fighter.
He's a solid fighter when he fights.
His style is kind of mockery towards his opponent. I agree with you, but if you look at his past fights, he's got real good. He's got a real good arsenal. His footwork is excellent. He does play around a little bit too much for my taste.
Yeah, for me too.
But you know what? He brings the fight. and let's see what happens.
And he has good pop, right? Which is stopping power, because he can mess around in there because he knows the power is going to bail him out time and again. So far it's proven to work.
Yes.
He needs a maybe like somebody with like a pit bull style that's just going to grind out, take a punch, and take it to him. But we don't have that in those divisions right now.
Doesn't have it.
Not in the larger division. So we have grind out fighters like Zurdo, like those guys, but we don't have a grind out, tuck your chin, bite your mouth guard, and rush forward type fighter. Which
he would have to go to another division. He would have to go to another weight class. For him, the thing about this guy, he's a big guy. He's a big guy. He's this tall, lengthy guy. But he can fight. He can fight whether you like his style or not. He can fight. I can see him going up, and because he is a little bit lengthy and he's a little bit, he could put on a couple of more pounds and go to the next division. And
I mean, he could stay. He hasn't delved into the top of the division yet, but you got who's the tops in his division is Bivol and Beterbiev. He's a light heavyweight.
Those guys are monsters.
Benavidez is going to be later on tonight. Benavidez against a Ukrainian former Olympian and former WBC champion Vostok. So how would Whitaker fare against those guys? Nowhere near.
I don't think so.
Nowhere near.
No, he needs to stay away from those guys. If he's really interested in going to the top of the division, he needs to stay away from that division.
Or stay away from that style and actually get back to his boxing pedigree.
Nah, even that. I think these guys are too. They're powerhouses. You don't change your style. Levels. Yeah, you don't change your style halfway through your career because you see opponents that are like monsters. It doesn't really happen. You hardly ever see it.
The only time you change your style is when you get beat.
Only when you're Munguia.
So you get only when you're Munguia. 6 fights later. So yeah, that's the thing with Ben Whitaker. He's still developing. He's still fairly new. But he's messing around with his style too much right now, where it's going to be a drastic change when he gets up. Because if this is what he wants to get to the titles, and this is what he's going to ride to the title contention, I see him getting stopped or getting embarrassed.
I like him. I really like him. I think he's good for boxing. I think his style is kind of... I don't like that flashy type of style. I like the heavy grinders. But I do like what I see in this guy. And for this guy to be taken serious and this guy to be getting to the top, where I think this guy could be, he has to change his style. He has to change his style now. Not tomorrow, because when he gets to the top, they're just gonna eat him up alive.
And even then, like, and I know I was saying that you just mentioned it. He doesn't really have to change much. He just has to stop playing around.
Yes.
Because the Olympics, the whole amateur career, he was a solid boxer with good punching, straightforward, good footwork. He's got to get back to that. Now he's getting into the dancing and the moving around and the ducking and weaving. It's impressive that he's able to see the punches, his reactionary time. But when he gets into the top levels, it's not going to pay off.
But with a fighter like that, especially a lengthy fighter, if you could get a Chavez-style type of boxer where he goes and attacks the body, he's going to get stopped. Yeah. I'm sorry, he's going to get stopped.
They're going to get on the inside.
They're going to get in the inside. To beat a guy like that, to beat a fat... I mean... Obviously, there's different types of fighters and you got the timing fighters, and you got the grinders, and then you got the body punchers. The body punchers, that's a good response to a type of fighter like this. And maybe he hasn't met that body puncher yet, but eventually he will. They're gonna catch on to his style, and you know what? I honestly believe that he will get stopped.
That's exactly it. So we saw, and we've seen it, right? History has proof. We saw Nassim Hamed run into Marco Antonio Barrera. Playful, couldn't happen anymore. It didn't work for him being playful. Then you saw Roy Jones, and Whitaker takes a little bit after Roy Jones. The flashy, the tucking your hands behind your back, it worked the rooster punch until he runs into Antonio Tarver.
Tarver knocks him out.
Right? And then, so there's always somebody out there that's going to have your number, especially when you're that flashy and that careless. And so he doesn't have to change his style. He's just got to go back to his roots.
Yeah, he has to go back to basics, and he has to take the boxing a little bit more serious and going in there and dancing around and trying to be flashy like these the prior predecessors that he's trying to imitate. because he's gonna meet his demise the way they did.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So the intrigue is what to see how he gets away with this one and what antics he pulls.
We'll
but
see.
the main event is it's not the most stacked undercard. So all the attention is on CBS and Riakporhe right now.
Yes.
And that's going to be super interesting. So it's a couple hours away from us. And hopefully you guys enjoy it. You guys could actually text the show now. So those of you, as soon as you guys see the episode, you could text the show and start commenting on there. You'll find me on X later on. You'll find me on Instagram as soon as the post goes up. You know that. If the episode's up, you could reach me out on Instagram. All day today we'll be active. All day today we'll be active, commenting, watching, and staying tuned to what's going on. Plenty more to bring you guys. We're going to put an end to this. And thank you again for joining me on this one. And we got plenty more boxing.
It's an honor. Hey, you know what? It's an honor being here. I follow your podcast before, and what you bring to the boxing world, it's amazing. And I can't believe, and I say this with all due respect, I can't believe that I know the guy that's doing this podcast. I can't believe this guy's a friend of mine because it's so good. You bring a lot of knowledge. You bring a lot of knowledge to the boxing world, and then it's something that you rarely see with these boxing commentators. I really will say that because I do follow a lot of boxing commentators. Like I said, when I first heard your show, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. So you know what? I'm honored being here. I'm honored sitting in the same room with you, and hopefully we could do this again some other time.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll get right back to it. So we'll be right back covering the next few fights. I appreciate the kind words, and I promise you guys that I did not pay him. I did give him a couple beers, so maybe he's starting to soften up to me a little bit. Other than that, this is all boxing. This is strictly business, and I appreciate, obviously, having guests here because I go at this by myself, and you guys know that. Those of you that have been following the catalog and the show since the beginning, you guys know it's been a labor of love on my behalf, and I'm on here alone, solo, just bringing it to you. And I tell you guys time and again, if you continue listening, I'm going to continue sitting on this side of the microphone and bringing you my point of view and my perspective as to what's happening in the boxing realm and the boxing world in today's age. So we'll leave you guys with that. We're both picking CBS to retain and continue, and we're not always big on making predictions, right? But later on, we're gonna have a little back and forth here because I already know what's happening in the upcoming episodes. So stay tuned to those. And hint, hint, we're talking about David Benavidez. That's gonna be an interesting one.
I love Benavidez.
So we'll check out here. Thank you guys again for tuning in to the Toma Todito Boxing Show, and we'll catch you guys all on the next episode. Take care.